The moment that luxury catamaran cut through the water, I understood what was really happening. I was Detective Marcus Webb, standing on my dock, watching Vanessa Caldwell step off her custom boat with her lawyer beside her, and I finally recognized the pattern. This woman wasn't trying to force me into her neighborhood association. She wanted my land. All of it. The renovated boathouse, the lakefront cottage, the pristine 3-acre property that had been in my family for 2 generations. A parcel worth $4 million in today's market, sitting right in the middle of what Vanessa had decided would become her luxury resort empire. They tried everything. Fabricated environmental reports, doctored satellite images showing my solar panels as illegal structures, even hired private security dressed like state rangers to inspect my property without warrants. All because Vanessa decided my cottage would look better, bulldozed, replaced with her vision, a high-end wellness retreat with waterfront villas, a spa, a restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. But here's what Vanessa didn't understand about dealing with someone who spent 30 years investigating crime. I know how lies look. I know how predators operate. And when this HOA president set her sights on my land, she didn't realize she was picking a fight with a man who had the training, the authority, and the temperament to dismantle her schemes piece by piece. 8 months before Vanessa's boat pulled up to my dock, my life was exactly what I wanted it to be, uncomplicated and mine. I wasn't a wealthy man, but I was comfortable. Detective Marcus Webb, 28 years with the county police department, single, divorced, 2 grown kids who had their own lives in other cities. Most weekends I spent on my property in the Clearwater Lake region, northwest of Denver, a 1,970 seconds cottage that my parents had left me, along with 40 acres of land that had become my sanctuary. The cottage wasn't fancy. It had been renovated carefully, new electrical work, updated plumbing, solar panels I'd installed myself with help from my Uncle Robert, a dock that extended 20 feet into the water. A small boathouse where I kept my fishing boat and kayak. The kind of place where you could sit on the porch at dawn and hear nothing but water and birds and your own thoughts. For a man who spent his career listening to confessions and accusations, that silence was essential. I'd inherited the place outright. No mortgage, no community fees, no obligations to anyone but myself. The property predated any neighborhood organization by 3 decades. It sat on land zoned for residential use, but in the county's eyes, it was independent, a private parcel with its own lot number, its own water rights, answering to nobody except the county assessor's office twice a year. I liked it that way. Then, in the spring, the announcement came. Caldwell Estates, a new luxury development community, was breaking ground 2 miles south of my property. 500 homes, gated, exclusive. The kind of place where people paid premium prices for the privilege of living near other wealthy people who also paid premium prices for that same privilege. For the first few months, I barely noticed. Construction is construction. Dust, noise, equipment, nothing unusual for a developing area. I was wrong about that. What I didn't know was that Caldwell Estates was the personal project of Vanessa Caldwell, who'd made her money in real estate development in California and had come to Colorado with the kind of relentless ambition that doesn't recognize property lines. And what I didn't know was that my 3 acres sat at the center of a scenic lake view that Vanessa had been promising to her investors for months. Around the same time, a brand new homeowners association was incorporated, Caldwell Estate Property Owners Association. CEPO, they called it. Vanessa was, naturally, the president. The bylaws were generous to anyone who agreed with her and brutal to anyone who didn't. I got my first notification in July, a slick brochure printed on expensive cardstock. The lake was now officially a shared community resource, the brochure announced. All properties with water access would be subject to association oversight, environmental standards, aesthetic guidelines, usage protocols. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My property wasn't part of their community. I'd read the county records myself. My land was independently registered, predating the HOA by almost 30 years. They had no authority over me. But Vanessa didn't see it that way. It was a Saturday in mid-August when the catamaran pulled up to my dock. I was in the water, actually waist deep, working on the intake valve for my boathouse circulation system. My nephew Tyler was up on the dock with a fishing rod. The boat was impossible to miss. White hull, chrome railings, the kind of luxury vessel people buy when they want to announce their net worth. 3 people aboard, all dressed in white linens despite it being August and blazing hot, all wearing sunglasses that cost more than my car payment. The woman stepping off the boat was unmistakable. Vanessa Caldwell herself. I'd seen her photo in the local paper's business section. Blonde, sharp-angled, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never had a wrinkle in her life. Her smile was bright and perfect and empty of warmth. Behind her came a younger woman clutching a leather portfolio, her PR liaison, I'd later learn, and a man in his 50s named Raymond Burke, wearing the expression of someone who'd been paid very well to make problems disappear. Vanessa didn't ask permission to approach. She just guided the boat to my dock like she'd been coming there for years. "Detective Webb?" she called out, extending her hand before she'd even fully stepped onto the weathered wood. I pulled myself out of the water slowly, deliberately. Water ran down my chest, my shorts. Every move was calculated. I wanted her to see that I wasn't intimidated, wasn't rushing to make her comfortable. I grabbed the towel hanging on the dock post and took my time drying my hands, watching her expression shift slightly as she waited. Her smile stayed fixed, but I caught the micro-expression annoyance at being made to wait. Good. I finally shook her hand. Her grip was firm, almost aggressive. Everything about her was constructed: the perfect manicure, the designer sunglasses, the white linen that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. "Can I help you?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Her smile tightened at the edges. "Well, that's what we're here to discuss. This lake has undergone a significant change in designation. The county approved our community's request to manage it as a shared recreational resource." I already knew this was incorrect. The county had approved a request for scenic easement review, a study, not an approval. But I let her keep talking. People reveal themselves when they think they're winning. "What you're describing," I said, "is a study, not jurisdiction, not authority, certainly not over private property that predates your association." The man in the expensive suit stepped forward. His name was Raymond Burke, some kind of legal advisor. "Actually, detective," he said, drawing the words out in a way that made them sound both reasonable and somehow insulting. "When a community establishes shared resource protocols, individual properties within that ecosystem do fall under association purview, especially when those properties show signs of environmental non-compliance." That's when the younger woman, Sarah, opened her portfolio. Inside were satellite photos, my dock, my solar panels, my boathouse, all of them circled with red markers. All of them labeled as unregulated development or environmental impact zones. "These structures," Sarah explained in a customer service voice, "represent unauthorized modification of the waterway ecosystem. Caldwell Estates has received multiple complaints from residents concerned about the ecological impact." I stared at the photos. They were clearly edited, heavily edited. The colors were wrong, the angles were off. Someone had even photoshopped away the county inspection sticker visible on my dock. "Did your residents also complain about the 300-yard construction zone you're currently blasting open 2 miles south?" I asked. Vanessa's eye twitched. Just barely, but I caught it. "That's different," she said. "That's development infrastructure." "Infrastructure," I repeated. "Right. So your development is allowed to change the landscape completely, but my dock, which has been here for 20 years and is county compliant, is suddenly an environmental hazard?" Raymond tried again. "The association exists to maintain community standards." "There is no community here," I interrupted. "Not on my land. My property is not part of your association, has never been part of your association, and never will be unless you somehow convince a judge that you can retroactively change 30-year-old property records." Vanessa's expression went cold, like a switch had been flipped. "Detective Webb," she said slowly, "it would be much easier for everyone if you cooperated. Caldwell Estates is the future of this area. Growth is inevitable. We simply need to ensure that all properties contribute to our shared vision for the lake." "Our?" I said. "The community's vision," Vanessa clarified. "Still not my community," I said, "and still not getting my property." She held my gaze for a long moment. I could see her reassessing, recalculating. This was the moment she probably expected me to back down. Most people do when faced with someone like Vanessa, confident, wealthy, connected, someone who's used to getting their way. "Well," Vanessa said finally, her voice dropping to a lower register that somehow felt more serious than any raised voice could have been, "we'll be in touch. And Detective Webb? You should seriously consider how this plays out. We take our community responsibilities very seriously." She turned and climbed back onto the catamaran without another word. Raymond and Sarah followed, and the boat pulled away from my dock, cutting through the water with arrogant smoothness. I stood there for a long time after they left, water still dripping from my shorts. Tyler looked up from his fishing rod. "Dad, who were those people?" "Trouble," I said. "The kind that doesn't show up with guns or badges. The kind that shows up with lawyers and a smile." That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove into town and visited the county records office. The county records office sits in a concrete building that smells like industrial cleaner. I'd been there hundreds of times over the years, pulling files related to investigations, property disputes, custody battles. The clerk on duty was David Patterson, a guy I'd known for 15 years. He took one look at my expression and gestured me to his desk without asking questions. "I need everything related to Caldwell Estates," I said. "Development filings, environmental petitions, jurisdictional claims, community planning documents, everything they've submitted in the last 6 months." David nodded and started typing. Within minutes, the printer was spitting out pages. What I found made my jaw clench. Caldwell Estates had filed a petition, quiet, strategic, buried in routine development paperwork, to reclassify the entire lake as a community-managed recreational ecosystem. Not just for residents, for everyone within the development's so-called scenic influence zone. The language was careful. They'd used environmental terminology, ecological integrity, watershed management, sustainable recreation protocols. But what it actually meant was clear. Vanessa was trying to create paper authority where she had none. And at the center of all their diagrams was my property. Circled, marked as non-compliant structure, flagged for remediation. "This is aggressive," David said quietly, reading over my shoulder. "I've seen some sneaky filings in my day, but this one's got planning behind it." "What's the status?" I asked. "Filed with the County Environmental Board 2 weeks ago," he said. "They've requested expedited review based on ecological concerns." That's when my detective instincts clicked into gear. This wasn't just about community standards. This was about acquisition. Vanessa had decided my property was worth taking, and she was going to use the legal system to do it. I pulled out my phone and called Diane Foster, my lawyer, and someone I'd known since law school. "I'm looking at county filings that are trying to establish authority over my property that doesn't exist," I told her. "What are my options?" "Send me everything," she said. "I'll need an hour to read through it." Exactly 58 minutes later, Diane called back. "They're laying groundwork to steal your land through bureaucratic pressure," she said bluntly. "They'll file environmental complaints. They'll request inspections. They'll drag you through regulatory proceedings until you either sell to them or run out of money fighting. But here's the thing, it's not actually legal. Your property predates their authority. You have all the permits. Your environmental compliance is solid." "So I'm fine?" I asked. "No," she said. "You're fine, legally. But they're going to make your life hell in the process, and they're not going to do it alone." That's when she told me about the shell company. Diane had dug deeper into the filings and found something interesting. Behind Caldwell Estates was an investment group called Lakefront Development Partners LLC, and behind that was a company called Prestige Hospitality Holdings. And behind that, buried in corporate paperwork, was a name, Vanessa Caldwell. She wasn't just trying to enforce community standards. She was trying to acquire my property to build something on it, something expensive. Diane sent me a scan of a real estate proposal, a glossy document titled Lakefront Luxury Experience, Phase 2 Development Opportunities. At the center was a detailed rendering of my cottage, except it wasn't my cottage anymore. It was gone. In its place was a sprawling luxury resort with waterfront villas, a spa, a restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, and, at the bottom, in small print, pending acquisition of private waterfront parcel and removal of current non-compliant structures. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't a neighbor dispute. This was a calculated attempt to take my home. For 3 weeks, I thought I had time. I thought I could let the legal process work. Diane filed motions. She submitted documentation of my property's independent status. She prepared arguments about property rights and the limits of HOA authority. I should have known better. The first sign came in September. I woke up on a Saturday morning to my phone buzzing. Text from my uncle Robert. Turn on the news. I did. There, on the local NBC affiliate, was Vanessa Caldwell, standing in front of the lake, my lake, talking about environmental concerns. We've discovered significant ecological degradation, she was saying into the camera, gesturing toward my property. Private development has been damaging the waterway ecosystem. Caldwell Estates is committed to restoration efforts, but we can't do that while non-compliant structures continue to harm the lake's integrity. They'd filed a formal complaint with the Environmental Board. They'd somehow obtained satellite photos from a private security firm showing my property. The County Environmental Board scheduled an inspection for the following week. That same day, I received a certified letter from the Caldwell Estates Property Owners Association. It was a notice of non-compliance with community ecological standards and a demand that I remediate environmental violations within 30 days or face enforcement action. Then came the fake park ranger incident. I was on my dock one afternoon when a boat pulled up, a legitimate-looking boat with a decal that said Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Two men climbed out wearing uniforms and carrying clipboards. We're responding to environmental complaints filed with the state, one of them said. We need to inspect your property. I asked to see their credentials. They showed me badges. Real-looking badges. I'm going to need to see actual state-issued identification, I said. And a warrant. They exchanged glances. Then they got back in the boat and left. I called an actual Colorado Parks and Wildlife officer I knew through work. She confirmed what I'd suspected. Those guys were fake. Hired security. But the message was clear. Vanessa was escalating. By October, things had spiraled into something that looked less like a property dispute and more like a coordinated harassment campaign. There was the drone footage they released to the local news, showing my solar panels and dock with dramatic music and a voiceover about unauthorized waterway modification. There was the petition they started. Save Clearwater Lake, that got 3,000 signatures from people who'd never been to the lake. There were the reporters who started calling my house, asking if I was aware my property was ecologically dangerous. But the worst part was when I discovered the surveillance. I was checking my security cameras when I noticed something odd. A second camera had appeared on the property line between my land and Caldwell Estates territory, mounted on a post, partially hidden by brush, recording directly at my cottage. Someone had walked onto my property in the dark, installed professional surveillance equipment, and expected me not to notice. When I approached it, I saw it was a professional-grade system, high resolution, night vision. I took photos, documented everything with my phone, noted the exact angle, the mounting screws, the brand of the equipment. Then, I did something they probably didn't expect. I didn't rip it down. I left it there, running. I wanted them to think I hadn't found it. Every day it stayed in place was another day of data I could subpoena. I brought it all to Diane. She filed an immediate complaint with the county about unlawful surveillance and harassment. Then, 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the smell of smoke. The boathouse was fine. The cottage was fine. But my dock, the 20-foot dock I'd spent weeks building, the dock my nephew used to fish from, the dock that had been part of this property for 2 decades, was burning. Flames were eating through the wooden structure, orange and hungry. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from inside the cottage and ran toward the water, spraying foam at the base of the flames, trying to slow the spread. My hands burned from the heat. The foam hissed and steamed as it hit the flames. Each blast felt like a punch. It took 40 minutes to get it under control. By the time I finished, my hands were blistered, my lungs were raw, and the entire western section of the dock was nothing but charred timbers. I stood there in the darkness, breathing hard, staring at the destruction of something that had been mine, that I had built with my own effort. They'd crossed a line. They'd gone from corporate intimidation to actual crime. I called 911. The fire department came. They documented everything. And when I walked through the burned remains, looking for anything that might explain how this happened, I found it. A scorched piece of laminated paper, partially melted but still readable. It was a logo, the Caldwell Estates crest. Someone had set my dock on fire, and they'd left a calling card. Diane was in my house by 7 a.m., reading the fire department report with an expression of focused anger. "This is it," she said. This is the line. They've crossed from civil matter to criminal matter. This is arson. This is harassment. This is conspiracy. Can you prove it? I asked. Can I prove Caldwell Estates as an organization planned it? Maybe not. Can I prove that someone with direct access to Caldwell Estates property and resources did it? Yes. And that's enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Diane assembled a case file that looked like a police report. She documented every incident, every fake inspection, every drone flight, every fraudulent environmental claim, every piece of surveillance equipment. She subpoenaed Caldwell Estates communications. She obtained records from the private security firm they'd been using. She filed requests for tower data showing which cell phones had pinged the area around my property on the night of the fire, and then she went on offense. The lawsuit Diane filed wasn't just for property protection. It was comprehensive. It sued Caldwell Estates for harassment. It sued Vanessa Caldwell personally for conspiracy. It sued the private security firm for unlawful surveillance and impersonation of law enforcement. It demanded injunctive relief, a court order forcing them to stop all enforcement action against my property. Most importantly, she filed a criminal referral with the county prosecutor's office. This is arson, she told the prosecutor directly. Documented harassment. Coordinated intimidation. You have a duty to investigate. The prosecutor took the case. While that moved forward, I did something that surprised people who knew me. I went public. I sat down with a reporter from the Denver Post and told the entire story. The fake rangers, the surveillance cameras, the harassment, the fire, the coordinated effort to take my property. The headline when it ran was direct, exclusive, luxury developers harassment campaign caught on camera and fire. Suddenly, this wasn't just a property dispute. It was news, and Vanessa Caldwell was the focus of a story nobody wanted to be the focus of. Within days, environmental groups started asking questions about Caldwell Estates' claims. Local officials who'd been quietly supporting the company started distancing themselves. The County Environmental Board issued a statement saying they were suspending review pending investigation into the veracity of environmental claims. Then came the court hearing. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters, county officials, residents of Caldwell Estates who'd started to wonder what their HOA president had gotten them into. Vanessa sat in the front row, dressed in a tailored suit, her expression carefully controlled. Diane presented every piece of evidence. Photos of the surveillance equipment, fire department reports, cell tower data showing a phone pinging my property at 3:17 a.m. when the fire started, a phone registered to a Caldwell Estates employee. Emails between Vanessa and the private security firm discussing environmental compliance monitoring. When Diane played the video of my dock burning, the courtroom went silent. Then she revealed the final piece of evidence, a contract between Vanessa Caldwell and Lakefront Development Partners discussing the acquisition of my property at a price that was $800,000 below market value, contingent on it being declared non-compliant and subject to remediation. The judge didn't even deliberate. He issued an emergency injunction immediately, ordering Caldwell Estates to cease all enforcement action. He froze the HOA's discretionary accounts pending investigation into financial fraud. And he referred the entire matter to the county prosecutor with a formal recommendation for criminal charges. This court finds credible evidence of conspiracy, fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, the judge said, looking directly at Vanessa. All enforcement action is hereby halted. Any further contact with the plaintiff regarding his property will result in contempt of court charges. Vanessa's face went white. The criminal trial took 6 months. The prosecutor built a methodical case. The security firm employees testified about being hired to conduct environmental monitoring that they admitted was actually surveillance. The cell tower data placed Vanessa's phone and 2 employees' phones near my property at the time of the fire. The contract documents proved clear intent to acquire my land through fraudulent means. The jury convicted Vanessa on 5 counts: arson, conspiracy, fraud, harassment, and attempted theft by deception. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her husband, who'd been overseeing the financial side of the scheme, got 5 years. The private security firm paid a $2 million settlement. Caldwell Estates, now effectively leaderless and drowning in scandal, fell apart. Residents sued. Investors pulled out. The development company declared bankruptcy. I rebuilt my dock, upgraded my solar system, installed proper security cameras with backup power, and I had a plaque made bronze, weatherproof, that I mounted on a post at the edge of my property. Private property, independently registered, not subject to HOA jurisdiction or claims. One evening in late spring, I was sitting on the rebuilt dock with my kids who'd flown in for the weekend. We were watching the water, talking about nothing in particular, just being together in the place we were supposed to be. My daughter asked, "Dad, what if she'd won?" I thought about that for a long moment. "Then I would have tried again," I said. "And again. Because some things are worth fighting for. Not because they're valuable in money, but because they're yours. Because they're home." Later that night, after they'd gone inside, I stood alone at the edge of the dock. The sky was full of stars, the kind you can only see away from the city lights. The water was still, reflecting everything above it. I thought about my parents, who'd first brought me to this lake when I was 5 years old. I thought about all the summers, all the quiet mornings, all the moments when I'd needed to remember what peace felt like. And I made myself a promise. Never again would I let someone take this from me. Never again would I let intimidation or money or fake authority push me away from what was mine. The property records were clear. The law was clear. And now there were also consequences, real prison cell consequences for people who tried to take what wasn't theirs. Vanessa Caldwell had wanted a war with a detective. She got one. And in the end, the truth won. It always does. You just have to be willing to fight for it. Here's what I learned from fighting Vanessa Caldwell. Threats don't announce themselves. They don't come in costume. They come in designer clothes with perfect smiles and impressive titles. They come with lawyers and paperwork and language that sounds important but means nothing. They count on you being too tired to fight back, too intimidated by their money, too convinced that the system will always favor people with resources. They count on your silence being interpreted as surrender. They count on you accepting that people like them always win because they've always won before. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. The system only works in their favor if you let it. The law is a tool, just like any other. It has power only if someone wields it. And those of us with the training, the patience, and the refusal to back down, we can use it just as effectively as they can. Don't be that person who gives up. Don't be the one who accepts the narrative they're building about you. Know your property rights. Know the law. Document everything. And when someone tries to take what's yours through deception and intimidation, fight back with the same tools they're using: law, documentation, and patience. Because the Vanessas of the world are betting you'll give up. They're betting that your exhaustion will eventually exceed your determination. They're betting that you'll decide it's easier to sell than to fight. Prove them wrong.